You ever try breaking something that refuses to crack? You hit it harder, again and again, but it doesn't break. It absorbs, it adapts, it grows stronger. That is India. The West has tried everything: colonization, exploitation, stereotyping, economic pressure, cultural dilution, and guess what? India didn't just survive. It reinvented the rules. Right now, while you're scrolling, watching, and wondering whether India is just catching up, the truth is it's already outpacing, outlasting, and outthinking the very systems that once tried to keep it down. And if you think this is just another speech hyping a country, stop. Because I'm about to show you why India isn't just another rising nation. It's the one place the West can't beat. By the time we're done here, you'll understand why empires fall, but civilizations like India bend and bounce back. Why every tactic used against India, cultural, economic, political, backfires. And why, in a world full of noise, India is quietly rewriting power dynamics. So if you're someone who thinks in headlines, buckle up. Because this is the real headline the world doesn't want you to read. India is unbreakable, and the West knows it. You can't talk about India without talking about its timeline, and it's not a short one. India isn't a 200-year-old country. It's not even 1,000 years old. India is a 5,000-year-old civilization that has stood taller than time, more persistent than any empire, and more unshakable than any modern state. And that, right there, is what the West can't defeat. Resilience forged in centuries of pressure. Let's go back. India was home to one of the world's first urban cultures, the Indus Valley civilization. While Europe was still in tribal mode, cities like Harappa and Mohenjo-daro were showcasing planned roads, sewage systems, trade routes, and mathematics. India was not just existing, it was thriving. But history didn't go easy on India. Wave after wave of invaders came. Persians, Greeks, Huns, Mongols, Mughals, and the British. Any one of these could have erased a weaker civilization. They didn't just try to conquer land, they tried to erase identity, rewrite culture, impose language, religion, and worldviews. But here's what's wild. India didn't resist change, it absorbed it. It didn't get crushed, it expanded, and it never forgot who it was. While Rome burned, kingdoms in India were building temples carved out of mountains, universities like Nalanda attracting scholars from Asia, and mathematicians like Aryabhata laying the foundation for the very numbers the West uses today. 0, that came from India. Decimal system, India. Chess, yoga, Ayurveda, India. This isn't trivia, this is cultural infrastructure. You don't defeat a nation that has outlived everything from emperors to ideology. Then came colonialism, arguably the most brutal test of all. The British Raj didn't just loot India. It aimed to fracture it from within, divide and rule, drain wealth, strip confidence. And yet, even under foreign rule, India sparked revolutions, non-violent and philosophical ones that shook the world. Gandhi didn't just fight for India. He changed the meaning of resistance across the globe. He turned simplicity into strategy. He turned silence into a weapon. Now ask yourself, what other nation can claim that? Fast forward to today, India is still dealing with poverty, complexity, and contradictions. It doesn't hide from them, it works through them. Unlike sanitized narratives of the West, India's growth is messy, real, and incredibly human. But its people, they don't give up. You'll see a child in a village learning coding on a second-hand phone, a farmer using solar apps, a grandmother debating politics sharper than a TV panelist. That's not chaos, that's resilience on display. Every time the world thinks India's down, it rises. When partition shattered the country, India built a democracy overnight. When famine hit, it became a net food exporter. When nuclear powers flexed, India quietly became one. When the West dominated tech, India built a space program on a shoestring and sent a satellite to Mars, cheaper than the cost of a Hollywood movie. You can't beat a nation like that because you don't know where its strength comes from. It doesn't come from machines or missiles or media. It comes from memory. India remembers every empire that rose and fell. It remembers the lessons, the pain, the pride. That's why no foreign narrative can stick. No pressure tactic works for long, because you're not dealing with a new nation. You're dealing with an ancient mindset in a modern body. And that's exactly what the West didn't expect. A country that carries 5,000 years of survival instinct into every negotiation, every innovation, and every challenge. That's not soft power. That's indestructible power. India may look like it's still developing on the outside, but on the inside, it's battle-tested. And that's why the West can't defeat India. In today's world, we're often told that power comes from tanks, jets, and nuclear missiles. But let's be honest, true power, the kind that wins in the long run, doesn't come from domination. It comes from influence, intellect, and ideas. And that's where India plays a different game altogether. For centuries, the West has measured power with military might, conquer, occupy, control. But India wins with the mind. This isn't just spiritual talk. This is strategic intelligence, philosophical depth, and intellectual resilience that has quietly outmaneuvered empires without firing a bullet. Let's break this down. India's real arsenal is intellectual depth. Indian civilization has always prioritized knowledge over conquest. While much of the world was expanding territories, India was expanding consciousness. The Upanishads, Bhagavad Gita, Buddhist philosophies, these weren't just religious texts. They were manuals on human behavior, leadership, ethics, and mental strength. And they spread not through wars, but through wisdom. You think about how Buddhism reached China, Japan, Southeast Asia, not with armies, but with monks. That's soft power on a scale the modern West didn't even recognize until recently. Fast forward to today. India doesn't need to launch aircraft carriers to get global attention. It exports ideas, innovation, and intellectual capital. Silicon Valley wouldn't be what it is without Indian engineers, CEOs, and technologists. Google, Microsoft, Adobe, IBM, all led by people with Indian roots. That's not a fluke. That's what happens when a culture values education not as a path to power, but as a path to self-realization. And while the West often leverages intelligence for strategic dominance, India cultivates it for resilience. The education culture. More than degrees in Indian homes, education is not a lifestyle choice. It's a legacy. From ancient gurukuls to modern IITs, India has built institutions that produce deep thinkers and solution makers, not just workers. Think about this. With a fraction of the military budget of the West, India has built a space program that reached Mars on its first attempt and did it for less than the cost of Gravity, the movie. Developed one of the most sophisticated digital ID systems in the world, Aadhaar, covering over 1 billion people. Became the pharmacy of the world, producing affordable vaccines and life-saving drugs for developing nations, not for profit, but for purpose. This is mind over might, thought over threat, strategic nonviolence, a masterclass in power. Let's talk about India's most powerful intellectual export, nonviolent resistance. The West saw revolution as armed conflict. India rewrote the script. Gandhi's Satyagraha wasn't just moral, It was tactically genius. It exposed the brutality of the British without ever picking up a weapon. It cornered an empire by forcing it to confront its own hypocrisy. To this day, the techniques used in civil rights movements, freedom struggles, and political protests around the world trace back to Indian philosophy. What kind of mind invents that? One that doesn't believe in defeating the enemy physically, but transforming the game itself. Modern diplomacy. India's quiet strength. India doesn't chase headlines. It doesn't posture on global stages the way some powers do. Instead, it builds alliances quietly, offers humanitarian aid globally, and plays the long game. It doesn't get bullied. It doesn't bully others. Whether it's its firm stance with China or balanced diplomacy with the US and Russia, India keeps one thing clear. Sovereignty isn't negotiable, but peace is always preferred, and that confuses the West. Because India doesn't follow the classic playbook of force, fear, and firepower, it plays chess when others are throwing punches. It educates, elevates, and evolves, and that makes it a far more powerful and unpredictable force than any army can measure. Here's the final truth. The West can build stronger armies, faster missiles, bigger defense budgets, but they still won't beat India because India isn't fighting the same battle. India is mastering the battlefield of ideas, of innovation, of identity. This is a country that's taught the world how to think, not just how to fight. And that is why India remains undefeatable, not because it flexes its military muscle, but because it plays the most powerful card of all: the mind. At first glance, India looks like a paradox. It has 22 official languages, over 2,000 distinct ethnic groups, every major world religion, and a kaleidoscope of customs, dress, diets, and traditions. It's loud, layered, and full of contradiction. And yet, it works. Not in the sanitized, linear way Western systems are designed to work, but in a way that's organic, adaptive, and above all, cohesive. That's the miracle the West can't replicate, and certainly can't defeat. In the West, even a slight ideological divide can tear societies apart. Elections divide families. Racial, cultural, and political differences polarize entire populations. But India? India lives with opposing realities side by side every day, and it's done so for thousands of years. That's not dysfunction. That's deep cultural strength. Unity without uniformity. Most modern nation states are built around one dominant language, one religion, one race, or one ideology. Not India. India is built on the opposite principle: unity without uniformity. Hindu temples stand next to mosques, which sit beside churches, and Sikh gurdwaras. Diwali and Eid are celebrated with equal flair. In one state, beef is banned. In another, it's on the menu. In one city, Sanskrit chants fill the air. In another, you'll hear Tamil poetry, Islamic prayers, or tribal songs passed down orally for centuries. This isn't just coexistence. It's coherence through contrast. India doesn't need everyone to agree to function. It needs everyone to engage. And it's been doing that for millennia. In fact, chaos is not India's weakness. It's the design, a civilizational culture, not just a country. Here's what the West doesn't fully grasp. India isn't just a country. It's a civilizational platform. This means its identity wasn't carved out by a constitution or modern statehood. It was formed through shared cultural DNA, epics like the Ramayana and Mahabharata, a deep respect for elders and teachers, philosophical debates about truth and duty, and a unique way of seeing the world through dharma, duty, karma, action, and moksha. India's strength comes not from top-down control, but from bottom-up harmony. Villages have panchayats, local councils. Cities have layers of informal order. Families operate like small economies. Religion, philosophy, and lifestyle are interwoven. Even when politics divides, This civilizational core holds people together. And that's why foreign powers, no matter how advanced or organized, can't fully understand or destabilize India. India destabilize India because they mistake the noise for weakness, when in fact, it's resilience in motion, surviving what should have broken it. Partition in 1947 split the subcontinent along religious lines, killing millions. Any other nation would have collapsed under that trauma. India didn't. In fact, just 2 years later, it adopted one of the most ambitious, inclusive constitutions in the world, recognizing not only the rights of individuals, but the diversity of its people. It didn't try to erase identity to build unity. It protected identity to sustain unity. Think about that. While the world was watching countries fall into dictatorship or ethnic civil war, India, a country with hundreds of ethnicities and languages, chose democracy. Was it perfect? No. Is it messy? Absolutely. But is it stable? More than most Western nations expected. That's what makes India dangerous. Not to the world, but to anyone who tries to control it. Because how do you destabilize a society that thrives on contradiction? The power of spiritual flexibility, cultural cohesion in India is also spiritual. It's not rigid. It flows. An Indian can pray in a temple in the morning, meditate with Buddhist chants in the afternoon, attend a church choir in the evening, and still see no contradiction. Because the Indian spiritual mindset doesn't believe in binary truth. It believes in many paths, one reality. This flexibility is what keeps India grounded while the world spins faster. It's what lets Indians adapt to globalization without losing identity. It's what makes Indian culture flourish, not just in India, but wherever Indians go, from Kenya to Canada. India is not chaotic because it's broken. It's chaotic because it's alive. The West often fears complexity. India embraces it. And that makes it hard to defeat, hard to predict, and impossible to fully control. Because at the core of all the color, noise, languages, and contradictions lies something that no external force can touch: a shared civilizational soul. And that's not just strong, that's unshakable. For decades, the West dismissed India as a chaotic, overpopulated, underdeveloped country struggling to find its place. It was seen as the land of call centers, slums, and spirituality, not as an economic threat. But while the world wasn't watching closely, India was building. Quietly, strategically, relentlessly. And now, the numbers are too big to ignore. India isn't coming. India is already here. But unlike China's loud state-driven rise, India's emergence has been silent, organic, and people-powerfully. Let's start with the data. India is now the world's 5th largest economy, having overtaken the UK, its former colonizer. It's projected to be in the top 3 within the next decade, right behind the US and China. It boasts a middle class of over 400 million, larger than the population of the entire United States. It's one of the fastest growing digital markets in the world, adding tens of millions of new internet users every year. And by 2030, it's set to be the largest consumer market on the planet. But India didn't make this leap with oil or natural resources. It did it with brains, grit, and innovation. Brains over brawn, India's knowledge economy. While the West was focused on building physical infrastructure and military presence, India was investing in human capital. The IT revolution turned India into the back office of the world. But that was just phase 1. Phase 2, India became the brain trust of global tech. Google, Microsoft, IBM, Adobe, and dozens of other major corporations are now led by Indian-origin CEOs. These aren't outliers. They're the result of a deep, disciplined culture of education, analytical thinking, and resilience. And now, phase 3 is here. India as the innovator. Indian startups are exploding. In 2016, India had 4 unicorns. As of now, it has over 100. In fintech, edtech, and health tech, Indian platforms are being adopted not just across the country, but across Southeast Asia and Africa. It's also building a digital public infrastructure model like UPI, Unified Payments Interface, that the West is now trying to study and replicate. India skipped the credit card phase and went straight to digital wallets in the hands of street vendors, farmers. You don't need cash or banks to do business in India anymore. You just need a phone. That's economic evolution in real time. Frugal innovation. Doing more with less. India doesn't throw money at problems. It outthinks them. The Mars orbiter mission, launched by ISRO, costs less than the budget of a Marvel movie. Aadhaar, India's biometric ID system, enrolled over 1 billion people and streamlined everything from welfare to taxation, saving billions in fraud and leakage. This model of frugal innovation, also known as Gugad, is now being studied in business schools worldwide. It proves that the future doesn't belong to the richest countries. It belongs to the most resourceful. Global partnerships, not dependencies. India isn't trying to dominate global markets through force or manipulation. It's partnering. It trades with the US, collaborates with Russia, dialogues with China, leads in the global south, and has deep cultural and economic ties with Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. Unlike many rising powers, India doesn't export ideology. It exports value, engineering talent, generic medicines, satellites, spiritual tourism, Bollywood, democracy. And here's the twist. While many countries become more authoritarian as they grow, India remains loudly democratic. A messy, multi-party, election-crazy, argumentative democracy that still delivers consistent economic growth. That is incredibly rare and incredibly powerful. Why the West didn't see it coming? India doesn't flex. It doesn't intimidate. It doesn't flood the world with propaganda. Instead, it quietly became indispensable. Western companies can't function without Indian developers. Global supply chains can't run without Indian pharmaceuticals. Diplomacy can't progress in Asia without Indian alignment. So while the West was looking for threats in armies and missiles, India became a power the world couldn't afford to ignore or confront. And the best part? India's economic rise is just getting started. The West is used to power that shouts. India is showing the world the power of stillness, scale, and silent disruption. No need for declarations. No need for domination. India is the silent economic giant in the room. And you don't defeat what you can't even see coming until it's already there in every corner of your economy, your workforce, your culture. That's not just strategy. That's When nations talk about power, they often mean weapons, wealth, or influence. But in the 21st century, real power is people. Not just any people, young, hungry, educated, and optimistic people who are ready to build, create, and lead. And no other country on earth has that advantage quite like India. While most of the developed world is graying, shrinking, and slowing down, India is doing the opposite. It's growing, it's young, and it's moving fast with a momentum the West simply can't match anymore. The numbers the world can't ignore. Let's break it down. India now has a population of over 1.4 billion, surpassing China as the most populous country on Earth. More than 65% of its population is under the age of 35. Nearly 50% is under the age of 25. The median age in India is 28 years. In contrast, it's 38 in the US, 42 in China, and over 46 in Japan and many parts of Europe. This isn't just a population, it's a demographic engine. While much of the West is struggling with aging workforces, rising healthcare costs, and labor shortages, India is looking at decades of workforce abundance, productivity growth, and entrepreneurial energy, a young workforce that builds the future. This generation of Indians isn't looking to be ruled, managed, or saved. It's looking to build. From coding in rural towns to starting companies in second-tier cities, India's youth is increasingly digitally native, globally ambitious, and socially conscious. They're creating fintech startups in Lucknow, building AI models in Bangalore, launching global brands from Hyderabad, hide, put your hand, and producing digital content consumed around the world, all with a phone, a laptop, and a mindset that says, why not me? This isn't just about jobs. It's about generational confidence. The Indian youth doesn't want to follow the West. They want to compete with it on their own terms. Education, skill, and aspiration, India is producing millions of engineers, scientists, doctors, designers, and developers every year. But here's what makes this powerful. They're not just being trained for degrees, they're being trained for adaptability. The rise of online platforms, free coding education, YouTube learning, and upskilling culture has made the Indian learner one of the most self-driven in the world. So while universities in the West are burdened with debt and bureaucracy, Indian youth are learning fast, failing fast, and scaling fast without waiting for permission. And with English as a second language spoken by hundreds of millions, Indian youth are more plugged into the global economy than any other emerging market. Youth as a strategic advantage, here's the part the West doesn't like to admit. No policy, no army, no amount of capital can manufacture a youthful population. You either have it or you don't. And India has it in abundance. This isn't just good for India. It makes India indispensable for the world. Multinational companies need talent, they turn to India. Countries with aging populations need workers, caregivers, tech support, they turn to India. Global economies need growth, they bet on India's consumption and innovation. India isn't just the back office anymore. It's becoming the brain trust, workforce, and marketplace of the future. But it's not just quantity, it's cultural quality. India's youth isn't growing in a vacuum. It's being raised in a civilization that teaches emotional intelligence, resilience, and mental flexibility as part of daily life. From managing family expectations to navigating complex social layers, Indian youth develop a unique edge, the ability to function in ambiguity, collaborate under pressure, and solve problems creatively. That's a kind of soft power no textbook can teach and no competitor can copy. While Western powers look inward, worrying about slowing birth rates and shrinking influence, India is raising a generation that's global by skill, local by soul, and limitless in ambition. They don't need saving. They just need opportunity. And when you combine 600 million young minds with access, education, and economic freedom, you don't get a rising country. You get a superpower in the making. This isn't a potential story anymore. This is happening. And it's why India can't be defeated. Because the future, it speaks Hindi, Tamil, Kannada, Bengali, and English all at once. In a world obsessed with power, progress, and politics, India draws its strength from something far deeper. Its soul. This isn't poetic language, it's strategic reality. Because while the West builds its identity on economies, systems, and ideologies that rise and fall with elections or market crashes, India is rooted in something eternal. Something no colonizer, invader, or global crisis has ever been able to erase. India's spiritual backbone is not just a cultural asset, it's a strategic force. And it's why, despite poverty, conflict, and centuries of foreign domination, India never broke. Spirituality is infrastructure in the West. Spirituality is often seen as a personal belief system, optional, abstract, and private. But in India, spirituality is infrastructure. It's built into how people think, how they live, and how they solve problems. Temples aren't just places of worship. They are economic centers, community halls, charity hubs, and cultural schools. The Gita, the Vedas, the Upanishads, the Quran, the Bible, the Guru Granth Sahib, these aren't just religious texts. They're life manuals, philosophical frameworks, and daily guides for millions. In India, spirituality is functional. It gives people a way to make sense of hardship, to endure chaos, to rise after failure. It teaches that suffering is part of growth, that detachment brings focus, and that duty is greater than self. These aren't just values, they're strategic coping mechanisms, and they've helped India withstand every attempt to break it from within or conquer it from outside. Colonized but never conquered. Here's something most history books miss. India has been ruled but never truly conquered. Why? Because to conquer a people, you must destroy what they believe. And India's beliefs have outlasted every empire that tried. The Mughals came and ended up building some of the most iconic Indian architecture. The British came and left behind railways and laws, but couldn't erase yoga, Sanskrit, or Diwali. Missionaries tried to convert, colonialists tried to suppress, but India's soul stayed intact. That's because India doesn't resist with violence. It resists with absorption. It takes what comes and absorbs it into something larger, deeper, older. That kind of spiritual elasticity makes it impossible to truly dominate. A global spiritual superpower today, India's influence isn't just technological or economic, it's energetic. Yoga is practiced by over 300 million people globally. Meditation, Ayurveda, and mindfulness are billion-dollar global industries, all rooted in Indian philosophy. The Bhagavad Gita is quoted in boardrooms, therapy sessions, and leadership seminars. Indian festivals like Diwali and Holi are now celebrated in Times Square, Trafalgar Square, and across the Middle East. And none of this is exported with force. It spreads because people are hungry for meaning, and India offers it. While the West produces technology to make life easier, India produces wisdom to make life bearable, even beautiful, through challenge and change. That's real power. The power to guide not just what people do, but how they feel and why they live spiritual strength in a crisis. What happens when everything collapses? Markets fail, governments fall, pandemics strike, wars erupt. And in those moments, people look for something beyond strategy, beyond reason. They look for hope, resilience, faith. That's where India stands tallest. Not because it avoids suffering, but because it knows how to endure. India, if we come to it, whether it's through a morning prayer, a sacred chant, a family ritual, or the simple act of offering food to a stranger, Indians have built a life philosophy that trains the soul for difficulty. That's not softness. That's unshakable strength. You can copy India's software talent. You can outsource its labor. You can buy its products and borrow its policies. But you can't replicate its soul. You can't defeat a country whose identity is older than history and more resilient than any army. Because at the end of the day, when all systems fail, only one thing holds a nation together: belief. And India doesn't just believe, it embodies. It lives. It breathes a spiritual depth that no superpower, no corporation, no ideology can ever match. That's not just power, that's immortality.